Welcome to the Motherhood's limited edition podcast series. I'm Cooper Monroe, the CEO of the Motherhood, and today I'm joined by Brittany Coburn, Executive Vice President of Operations, and Christina Soriano-Jacobs, who is our VP of Client Services. We're talking today about something that is foundational to this organization, foundational to all of us, the work on the campaigns that we do, and that is social good and public service campaign, public awareness campaigns. We've been doing this forever. Our very first work in this space was around public service and public awareness campaigns. And we've done it ever since and continue to do so, and will in the future.
Building on what Cooper said, I have had a front row seat to this industry for the past 10 to 15 years. And I have to say, it's really amazing recently how influencers and content creators have gone from, sharing lifestyle content to really getting a lot more vulnerable and sharing content with their readers related to maternal mental health, talking about issues that are important in elections, and just really getting personal and more vulnerable in a way that we haven't really ever seen to this degree before. So one example of an influencer who's doing this in a really incredible way is our guest today, Jamilla Svansson-Brown. She and her wife Q live in Atlanta and have two adorable girls, Harper and Holland. And their content is hilarious and it's relatable. And they're one of our absolute favorite people to collaborate with. They have amassed over 8 million views just on YouTube alone. So we're not alone in loving everything that they're putting out. So they share causes important to them, including their adoption story and LGBTQ plus issues that are important to their family. And, we'll get into it a lot more today, but they've partnered with organizations such as Families Fighting Flu and Kitty Fire Safety and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And so they go deep and they share a lot of their hearts and their values with their readers. And we're really excited to speak with you today.
Hi, I'm Jamilla. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to talk with y'all.
We are super excited to have you. As Brett and Cooper both mentioned, we have been so lucky to work with you on so many different campaigns and just bringing the personality that you have and your voice of authority. So thank you so much for joining us today. I would love to hear a little bit more about yourself, how you became a content creator, just all the things.
Of course. My wife and I have been creating content for about 8 years now. We first started when she actually proposed to me. And being newly engaged, I just wanted to consume wedding content. I was just like, I want to see everything wedding, everything engaged, the journey to the altar. But I wasn't seeing anyone who looked like me, who was in a relationship that looked like mine. And at first I was very disappointed. I was very sad, but then I said, let me build the platform that I want to see so no one has to go through that ever again. And that was my wife and I talking about our journey to the altar. We talked about our first couple of months of being married and some of the kind of arguments and discussions we had with that. And then our journey to purchasing a home and having kids. And we've just been lucky to build this platform and this community that we support and supports us.
That was such a good story. I didn't realize that you started right when you got engaged. So that is fantastic.
The entire team talks about you all the time. We love you so much. You guys are amazing. What you do is so good. We've been doing this a really long time. And so every once in a while, I'd like to ask, it's not easy what you do. I mean, you're putting your life out there, but it's also just technically, there's so much that goes in to the behind the scenes. You guys make it look easy, but we know how much work goes in to what you produce. But a lot of times content creators or influencers will talk about that they were inspired by or learned from people in their lives. Typically it's a female relative who was really active in the community or participated a lot. There was, a teacher or active in the church or whatever it was, but very active in their community as someone who was a go-to person. And just curious if that is relatable to you, or kind of your inspiration for dedicating your life to this work.
I think for me, growing up, well, one part of sharing my life, I used to think that I was the only one in my life growing up who actually wanted to do that. Like everyone thought that that was like strange. Like, Jamilla, you're uploading what you ate for dinner. Who cares? But I was just excited about it. But I remember going through some of my baby photos, and I would see my mom pregnant with me posing by her car, pregnant with me posing by the front door, pregnant with me at the grocery store. And then I'm born, and she would tell me stories that she would be driving and she would see some cute rocks. And then there was a photo of a baby picture of me on some rocks. I joke that my mom is like the original like influencer before there was. But as far as like sharing myself and being passionate about the topics that I'm passionate about, growing up, I want to say in elementary school, we had superlatives, and one of my superlatives was a future political. One of my superlatives was being a future politician. So I think awesome. I just always wanted to talk about things that were super important to me.
Was that an early conversation in your relationship with Q? Did you guys see eye to eye on that?
I think so. I think she knew I was very passionate about it because I've been passionate about YouTube specifically since the creation of YouTube. And she knew that I was following people, and then I also had an iPhone and Instagram before her. And I remember she would take my phone and look at my Instagram, and she's like, this is so cool. So I really think we were both on the same page when I told her, I really want to share my life. I'm so disappointed that I don't have anyone to really look up to in this space who looks like me. And she was really on board from the beginning.
I wanted to ask you about, since you did start 8 years ago, we've seen so much change in the landscape of content creation, social media, and it changes. I mean, we say year after year, but I feel like sometimes it's day to day. So just, I don't know if you think maybe in 2020 you saw a shift. Did things change dramatically with that particular year? Or when did you and Q notice any sort of shifts and things becoming maybe a little bit more awareness based versus, the typical day to day? So just curious to hear your opinion on that.
Totally. For me and our platform, what I've always loved about us is that we've always talked about the tough topics that have impacted our community. In 2020, what I noticed was a reckoning across so many industries where you had so many people who were saying, hey, there are a lot of voices that maybe we haven't highlighted in the past, maybe we haven't listened to. Let's listen to these voices because there's something being missed across all industries. And it was really beautiful to see. And what my hope is that the diversity, the uplifting of voices, the listening to opinions that maybe don't align with our personal experiences continues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that opened a lot of conversations for people, and just, it was such an important moment. And we're still seeing those conversations happening today. So it's really great. Thank you for using your voice for that too.
Thank you.
Have you seen an uptick in opportunities for sponsored campaigns that allow you to share your voice in the way that you just mentioned?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There was definitely an uptick between the last 2 years of campaigns. And what was so exciting is that I'm passionate about so many things. So when there is a campaign that aligns with topics that I'm already going to talk about or already provide comfort for me, it's just an exciting opportunity.
Do you have any significant reader comments or reactions or DMs or anything that stand out to you?
One campaign for me that maybe wasn't initially thought of as social awareness, but became very significant for us was our Walgreens beauty campaign, because my wife is masculine presenting, and you do not see a lot of masculine presenting women in beauty. And for Walgreens to take a chance on us and to put my wife on their website so that masculine presenting women, Black masculine presenting women, can go on Walgreens and see themselves represented in a way in beauty that they never have before, that was indescribable for us. So we received a lot of feedback around that, where a lot of people felt that they were being seen and represented in a brand new and special way.
I think continuing on the conversation of campaigns, so we recently worked with you on a campaign called Families Fighting Flu, with the organization Families Fighting Flu. And this is just to give a little bit of background as an organization, as you know, that's really about raising awareness of the flu and how serious of an illness that it can be, making sure people are aware of the vaccines that they can have, getting tested if they feel sick, things along those lines. So when we kicked off the program last summer, we had an onboarding call with all of our creators. And we got to hear a lot of those incredibly emotional stories of people who may have lost a child or a family member to the flu, and just how incredibly impactful that was. So just, I'm curious what drew you to that campaign, and how you sort of felt walking out of that onboarding session.
What drew me to that campaign was social responsibility. Being a part of the Black community, I know there's a lot of skepticism around vaccines. And this is also coming out of 2020 and the COVID vaccination and a lot of the information around that. But above all, what we all can relate on when we have children is being parents and listening to the stories from that team, taking their scariest moments that they've ever had in their life, what maybe they consider the lowest moment, and using that to spread awareness is brave and it's honorable. And for me to have had like a small part in sharing their stories was very, I did not take that lightly. And knowing that sharing that with a community that they themselves could potentially be skeptical, I did not take that lightly. So coming out of that partnership was so enlightening, and it made me feel really good to share information and share research that ultimately could change and hopefully impact a lot of other families that look like mine.
You've really touched upon in the, just even in the few minutes that we've talked with you, what makes you so unique and so good at what you do. And it's, clearly you're very passionate and you care about the work that you're doing, but you've also done something really interesting in that you've tapped into what is kind of fundamental in what you do, and that is build trust with your community. So that trust, I'd love to hear more about how you've done that. And when you share things, it probably resonates with a huge portion of your audience, but sometimes do you get pushback? And, or people kind of not completely happy about what you're posting, or they want to enter into a discussion about it. Could you talk about that relationship with your audience, the trust that you've built, and then sometimes when you've got to, or you're getting some pushback from the people on your different platforms that follow you?
Absolutely. Trust for me is one of the most important things to build with community. And I think that goes on with support as well. But it's also the knowledge that not everyone's going to agree. No community is monolithic. And it's that understanding that I could potentially share a topic or share an opinion that a multitude of people could have an issue with. What I love about what I do in my day-to-day life, in my personal life, and on social media is when I share a topic and someone tells me, Jamilla, I never thought of it that way before. That's my goal. And I think sometimes with influencing and creating content is this idea that try this product. This product will change your life. It's this idea of you have to go this route. And if you don't go this route, oh my goodness, you have a problem. There's an issue. I share content, sponsored, organic, that I'm passionate about, but my goal is to just share an opinion or share research that ultimately you could take with yourself, with your family, and think about it and ponder and maybe see a different side. So that's always been my approach. I try to have a very relatable, open dialogue kind of approach to these topics. So when I have someone who doesn't agree, it starts a conversation. And that's ultimately what we all want. Maybe people feel like because I have a platform that my opinion has a larger reach, but we all want to feel heard, no matter if we have a platform on social media or not, no matter if we're just talking to our girlfriends, to our moms, our best friend, we want to feel heard. So in that moment, if someone has a disagreement, that may be my opportunity to learn something new. Maybe I have a blind spot, or maybe that's my opportunity just to share additional information that they can sit and partner on, because it has to be a two-way street to be able to disagree and still build that community and have trust with one another on an individual basis.
That's so good. Okay, so I'm just thinking about, people turn on the news, or they're watching somebody talk at them about an issue. And so I think what you're saying is that misinformation or mistrust in certain things, or not agreeing on things, progress can be made by the two-way conversation. And that, you being a leader in that, it's different than somebody just consuming their news, and hearing things, as opposed to engaging in a two-way conversation.
Of course, I'd rather provide information that someone could take and learn more on their own, on an individual, versus saying everyone needs to take this route immediately. Everyone needs to try this detergent immediately.
Yeah.
It's more of a vessel. This is information that worked for me, that I'm passionate about, that works for my family. I would love to share it with you, and for maybe you to try it out. It works for your family, or for you to do the research and decide ultimately what's best for you and your family.
Where do you find that you have the richest engagement with your community on topics like this? Is it in the comment section? Does it take place sort of behind the scenes in DMs? Where do you typically find that?
I find the deepest conversations go down in the DMs. Maybe people feel like they have a topic that, or an opinion that they're worried that other people could have eyes on. And so maybe they feel very more of a personal connection with me, that they just want to have a DM conversation. Comments are really good too, but I find more deeper conversations in the DM.
Before, when you were talking about being heard, and that's something that's super important to you, and making sure that your followers are feeling heard as well. I think knowing that you are both in the LGBTQ plus community, and a Black woman, a lot of information is so important around mental health. It's a conversation that I know in a recent interview that you were sharing, that you want to continue to shed light on this. It's an incredibly important cause for you. So I'd love to talk more about that, and how that's comparing to today versus 5 or 10 years ago. Just what you're seeing, and what your followers are asking for.
In the recent years, I would say within the last year or two, there has been a movement on social media, especially for Black women, discussing leading a softer life, discussing not being the trope of a strong Black woman. And it's important to me to show balance, because sometimes when you see a lot of pretty photos, a lot of edited reels and TikToks, we have an idea that that person's life may be perfect, or what our idea of perfection may be. For me, it's been important for me to talk about my ongoing anxiety, talking about the postpartum anxiety that I suffered after pregnancy, my wife's postpartum anxiety, the impacts of that on our marriage, on our relationship, and as individuals. Because for me, that provides balance, where it's not just pretty photos, where you realize in order to take this picture, we all had to laugh and joke and come together, and these kids were going crazy, falling out, and ultimately it's a nice photo because we're happy. And it's okay if there's a child on the floor, or if there's someone with their finger in their mouth, because I really want to showcase reality and a balance. So it's always been very important for me to talk about, especially being a Black gay woman, all of the things that may impact me and impact my life to let others know you're not alone. I just happen to have a photographer who takes good photos, but you're definitely not alone in what you go through.
Something we've talked about as an agency has been creators including their children in content. Some opt to do that very prominently, some don't share names, some don't share faces. There's just a lot of ways that creators can approach that. And your adorable daughters are in your content often, and they're the brightest spot in our Instagram feeds, and we'd love to see them. Is that a conversation that you and Q have had together? Have you started talking about that with them, or what's your approach there?
Absolutely. What's so funny is that I just had a comment the other day where someone commented and said, Jamilla, didn't you notice that Holland's not really in that photo that you posted? And I had to respond back to her that there are a lot of times where my children don't want the camera in their face, and that's okay. We have times where Harper will say something so funny, and I'm like, Harper, we call our community our cousins. Harper, can you just tell your cousins what you just told me? And she'll look at me, Mama, no. And that's no. Because she has anatomy over herself and also how she wants to share and interact with social media. Because ultimately, although my wife and I put our lives out there, there is a line of how much we put out of our children because they grow up and they are able to do the Google searches and go back and see all of their information shared. So it's definitely a conversation we've had about how much of our children's privacy that we hold to ourselves and how much that we share. And I think that's why a lot of our stuff, when it happens, if it's funny, I'll just ask Harper, do you mind if I share this? And if she says no, it's a no, and I respect her privacy.
That is such a thoughtful approach for including your children, your girls in your content.
And as the kids grow up, as they do, this industry's growing up. It's changing and morphing by the year, and it's really been accelerated over the last couple years, certainly. What do you think? What are your thoughts on looking ahead the next 5 years in the creator world, but also when it comes to public awareness campaigns as well?
That's what I often think about is the longevity of the career and ultimately what I would like our content to look like in 5 years. And what's always been important to me is sharing what we're going through, not just creating content that I think is going to be popular or potentially viral, but content that's really, really about what we're going through. I think for public awareness, I see a continuation of these campaigns because now you see when something very big happens in the news, you'll see in the comments where people are asking their favorite content creators their opinion because they look to a lot of content creators for support on an everyday basis. So when something's happening to the community that hurts the community, you're looking to that same content creator for that support in that moment. So I feel that there will be a continuation in that space.
Yeah, and we saw that with the last election too. I mean, there were around politics, elections, issues, health and wellness, mental health. It's such a great point that there are people that you can turn to for more information because you trust them.
Absolutely. And the way I think of it being Black, being a woman, being LGBTQ plus is that I've never had the option to opt out of being political. Everything about my being, who I love, my body, and the color of my skin is argued every day on media. And so it's not something that I can opt in and opt out of. So I have to show up for my community, especially in those moments.
That's a lot of responsibility. What advice do you give to up and coming creators, people that are just starting out, about what to expect and how to handle it, and any other thoughts that you share with them?
Ultimately, I think the best thing to do is to build a community. Is if there's a lot of commentary around what influencers should or should not do, what kind of content creators should make. And ultimately, if you want to make that kind of content, make the content that you want to see and build that community that you want to build. I don't believe in a focus on being viral, on growing a following, on getting the likes. Someone to me once said, even if you have 10 followers, 100 followers, if you put 100 people in a room with you who all support you, that feels like a lot of people. So show up for that 100, show up for that 500, and keep showing up for your community. And the people who need to hear your voice, who need to hear what you say, they will ultimately come.
Let's say those 100 people were all brands or nonprofits or organizations, and you had a chance to tell them something. What would it be?
I think it's to trust the influencer and the content creator that you're hiring. When I work with not this team, I absolutely love this team. Working with some brands where it's a very strict script or it's a very strict way that they would like the content to be created, it takes the creativity out of our hands. And the content creator is the one who has that personal relationship with their community, so they know a little bit about how that content will be received. So I believe it's that if you do the research, if you trust the influencer, if you trust the content, and you like the content that they have created in the past, I think it's really good to communicate content of theirs that you really enjoy and let them know that this is the content that you would like to see.
So, as an influencer and as a creator, trust is your currency. You have influence because your followers trust you. And whether your content is sponsored or unsponsored, your readers know that your opinion is the most authentic coming from you. Can you talk about how you vet a opportunity that's presented to you for a campaign and what causes you to say yes or no?
For me, the biggest thing is research behind the company. Of course, being a part of the LGBTQ plus community, knowing if that company has ever had any issues with the community before. Also deciding if I am a diversity pick. So are you picking me because you really align with my content and you really feel like you know me and my wife and my kids and we would just be a great fit for your brand? Or are you trying to fit a quota? So that's all that goes into the research that I look into, because that's something that even if I create the content, I feel like my community will know the difference. And they'll say, oh, okay, this is not a message that really aligns with what Jamilla and Q usually talk about. So it's really that responsibility of finding brands that really do align with the causes that we care about and with the community.
I think every client needs to hear that. That's really important.
Is there anything else that you, Jamilla, want to talk about that you feel like this conversation lends itself to?
Absolutely. I think we've talked about more social awareness and the campaigns around that. And I want to let influencers and content creators know that it's okay to talk about causes even when it's not sponsored. When I was pregnant, it was very important for me to talk about Black mental health. And it was very important for me in 2020, I was pregnant, and this is the height of, there was a rise in the Black mortality death rate, especially in Georgia. And that was a real fear of mine. And it was important to talk about that, especially acknowledging my privilege. Although I am a Black woman, I do have privilege being cisgendered, and knowing that my Black non-binary and Black trans partners in the community have such a far, far, far gap to go in mental health spaces. And it's okay to talk about those causes that are important to you, even if you do lose some followers, because you're going to gain the people that need to hear that and need to feel seen. And that's what's important for me. It's nice when a kidda comes to you and says, I want to talk about fire safety because fire safety is very passionate to me, but it's also good for me to talk about those causes that I'm passionate about on an everyday basis as well.
Do you try to maintain any sort of ratio between sponsored and unsponsored content?
I wish I was more strategic, because really, especially in lifestyle content, when something funny happens, I'm like, I just have to share. I have to make this funny and I have to share it in a funny way. But what I know, being fans of other content creators, when I see a lot of sponsored content, how that feels. And so I've always thought about that if I have a lot of sponsored content coming up, knowing that I need to show up in so many other ways to balance that out.
What advice do you give to people who are afraid of putting their thoughts or views out there because of trolls or just the nature of social media can be in terms of negativity?
I respect how everyone wants to show up, because diversity doesn't just mean having people who show up and talk about every social, political issue. Sometimes some people use social media to escape. So they need those content creators who are just providing great content about makeup or great content about skincare. That content is important as well. And so, however, a content creator or influencer wants to show up authentically, I absolutely support them, because there's a room enough for all of us. You have influencers who only talk about political things, who only talk about social awareness, and you have content creators who never talk about it. And then you have those who I would consider myself, who are just a little bit in between, and there's room for everyone.
That's something that we've been saying for a long time. It's exactly right, is that people show up for content that adds value to their lives. And that value could be anything. It could be a makeup tutorial, or it could be information on upcoming election, and, the whole range, or, what to do with the chicken breast in your refrigerator. So, I mean, it's, but you're right. People will find that content that adds value to their lives, and we don't know what that could be, but they're going to find it. Anything else you'd like to share? This is really, I would have loved to have this conversation even if we weren't recording it. It's amazing. It's amazing.
I just want to say thank you so much for the team. Thank you so much for always showing up for us and taking care of us and being very respectful of us, of how we show up in content. And I feel very, very supported. So I just want to say thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, the space, and the platform to have this conversation.
You bring so much goodness and back to that word value, and so much to the people who follow you, but to anybody that is going to see the work that you do and hear your words and your vision and your mission. And it's you make the world a better place, and you make us better because of the work you do. So we are very, very grateful, and know that we talk about you all the time because we just love you guys.
Thank you. That made me emotional. Thank you so much.
And I hope everybody who's listening will go to Jamilla and Q. You can find them on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, and they're amazing. And it will just bring a smile to your face and make your life a little bit better. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to be bouncing around all day. This was such a great conversation.
Thank y'all so much.